Hi, I'm Shannon, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the legacy of Thomas Jefferson. So, Thomas Jefferson was one of our key founding fathers. He's credited with writing the Declaration of Independence. He was the first Secretary of State under President George Washington, and he served as our nation's third president. However, recently Thomas Jefferson's legacy seems to be under more and more scrutiny. One area of Jefferson's legacy that has been scrutinized is his reputation as the author of the Declaration of Independence. According to the article Thomas Jefferson's Changing Reputation as the Author of the Declaration of Independence, the First 50 Years, published in the Journal of the Early Republic, many people as early as 1805 began to question the crediting of Jefferson with the writing of the Declaration of Independence. The article questioned the legacy of Jefferson writing the Declaration of Independence by examining what his contemporaries believed about his contributions. John Adams began to question why Jefferson was credited with the penmanship of the Declaration in the first place. Adams believed that it was Congress who wrote the Declaration, not Jefferson individually. So already his legacy was being shifted so that today's students still learn that Jefferson wrote the Declaration independently, but not with Congress's help. The article further explored that Jeffersonian Republicans were responsible for spreading this belief that Jefferson wrote the Declaration, which really contributed to the development of his legacy. The author of the article, Robert McDonald, explained that although the idea of his independent writing of Jefferson is controversial, Jefferson did contribute a great deal of the work. Jefferson wrote the first draft, and he wrote it with the specific purpose of being read aloud. Many believe that Jefferson understood the importance of the Declaration of Independence and wanted to ensure that all Americans, whether literate or not, could hear those influential words. So Jefferson's opponents wished to diminish this involvement, but as it stands today, a piece of his legacy is his writing of the Declaration of Independence, regardless of how accurate it is. A second piece of Jefferson's legacy is his legacy of the idea of separation of church and state. Today, many use Jefferson's ideals as a method of explaining why there should be a strict separation of church and state in the United States. Some even believe that his ideas are what created the First Amendment. However, the article, The New Perspective of Jefferson's Views on Church-State Relations, the Virginia Statute for Establishing Religious Freedom in its Legislative Context, explored the implications of this legacy. According to the article, Jefferson did not intend for the development of the strict wall between church and state. Instead, he wanted to protect a person's individual religious freedom. Again, Jefferson's legacy is not something that he wished to create. Jefferson wanted to ensure that a person was able to practice any religion that he or she chose without fear of punishment from the state. Jefferson wished to reduce the fines people had to pay if they did not attend the religious services. So Jefferson then wrote the Bill number 82 for the Virginia legislature that focused on the protection of individual religious freedoms. This bill is a huge piece in his legacy. The bill explained how an individual's mind is free, and therefore he should be able to protect his religious interests. Jefferson's legacy of religious freedom started with the Bill number 82, but it's been used countless times today to explain why we should have a strict separation between church and state. So this is an example of how someone's legacy is not something that they really wanted to create. Jefferson never intended for that strict wall to exist, and yet that's part of his lasting legacy. The third piece of Jefferson's legacy that is under attack is his use of slaves. So a piece of his legacy ties back to his writing, All Men Are Created Equal, and yet he still enslaved over 600 people in his lifetime. Jefferson's legacy of a man who wanted equality is questioned when one reviews his use of slaves at Monticello. According to Jefferson's Attitudes Toward Slavery, published by the Thomas Jefferson Foundation, Jefferson was against the institution of slavery for his entire life. That's the positive piece of his legacy. However, It's controversial because at the same time, he still enslaved people and actually believed that blacks and whites were two separate groups that should not mingle. So, throughout Thomas Jefferson's life, he believed that slavery was a moral depravity and that slavery went against everyone's personal liberty. He was against the institution throughout the entire American Revolution, and yet at the same time, he had specific racial beliefs which indicated that he believed blacks were inferior to whites. So, this idea is what really taints his legacy. So, according to the webpage published by the Thomas Jefferson Foundation, Jefferson believed that there should be a gradual emancipation of the slaves in the United States. However, once those slaves were freed, they should be returned to Africa or to the West Indies. So Jefferson's legacy is controversial when one discusses the issue of slavery because it's contradictory of itself. He was struggling with his own belief system in terms of slavery, which impacts his legacy. Like any other historical figure, when looking at Thomas Jefferson's legacy, we have to look at both the positive and the negative impacts of what he left behind.